don't react, never apologize, document everything, and attack from the moral high ground, and finally strike them down with the law. And that is how you defeat a chimera. So let's talk about how to fight a chimera. How can we defeat a chimera, and what even is a chimera? Well, if you have read or are familiar with Mr. Carl Jung's book here, The Undiscovered Self, he discusses a very interesting concept. Is there any way I could get a reading as well after? Yeah, let me see. I'll add you onto the list. Arwin. I'm gonna totally screw up reading that later. Golden. Awesome. So Carl Jung discusses what he calls a chimera. And a chimera is a mythical being you may be familiar with, which is two beasts formed into one, or, as more traditionally is proposed, a beast with many human heads attached to it. And that's the true origins of the chimera. Sometimes it's an eagle with a lion's body, but it's a amalgamation of two beasts, and it's a very powerful and destructive force, known for its quality of breathing fire and being just overwhelmingly destructive. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is a psychologist who's a great mind talking about some mythical creature called a chimera and saying that it's real? Well, what Carl Jung argues in his book is that the chimera is real. In fact, it exists, it happens all of the time. It's just, it is a psychological phenomenon rather than a mythological phenomenon. So what he's describing here is a chimera is what is produced when you have people who do not set truth or Christ, logos, as their highest ideal. So people who do not worship Christ or allow something to be above truth. Those people are vulnerable across the board to possession, ideological possession. Christians would say demonic possession as well, emotional possession, and any sort of energetic force can take control if you have not filled that spot up with logos and truth. This is why Christians are so adamant about, worshiping Christ above, having no idols, and so on and so forth. All those call to actions are to prevent this thing from happening. Now, that alone doesn't make a chimera, but those are the targets of which chimeras are built. And so, what Carl Jung describes as a chimera is groups of people that have their logos, the place where you should be placing logos, open and available. You can then swap in an ideology or an emotion or a spirit even. Those can come in and really take over where logos would have prevented. Now, once you have that energy that controls the person's mind, you have the building parts of what makes the chimera. So, now that you're getting ready, you've got groups of people who have open portals, if you will, to be controlled by an ideology. All that ideology has to do is then feed on the energy of resentment. If you combined a ideology or a emotion or a demonic force with a body of people and then feed it resentment, then you have the building blocks of a chimera. And that's what summons a chimera into this existence. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And so that's what we call a chimera. And so what's interesting about the chimera is when people get absorbed into these ideologies, and you see this all the time, whenever you see someone who everyone's waving the same flag, everyone has the same ideas, everyone has the same slogans and phrases, the same words, the same colors, all of those things are the buildings of a chimera. It's people who have sacrificed their own intelligence, their own mindset, their own beliefs and actions. They get turned off and controlled by something else as a collective. This is what makes mobs of people. Mobs are typically chimeras, and that's where you get the image of a giant beast with many heads. That's where the image of the chimera comes from. And so this is the beast. This is the thing to be feared, and this is what Carl Jung tells us. Hey, watch out for this. This is a fearsome creature, and what's interesting to note is that the Chimera is no longer individual people. It's important to know that it's made of these groups of people, but it cannot think, it cannot reason, it does not actually have beliefs. So the Chimera will spit out words, it's fire. It'll spit out words and say, this is what we believe in, this is what we want, this is what we are standing for. But in reality, none of that is true. They don't actually care about any of the things that they say. None of their beliefs are real. The Chimera cares about one thing and one thing only, and that is consuming more energy. And so a Chimera seeks to create situations that will produce emotional energy that it can then feed on to gain power, because its main focus is to gain attention to gain power. And that's where the Chimera goes. So a smaller Chimera will go and feast on smaller people. And there's this game that the Chimera is constantly playing, which is, how can I find this person that will get me the most attention that is still small enough for me to devour? And so that's the kind of battles that the Chimera plays. Now you know what the Chimera is. I like the one where the Monopoly man had no monocle. That was cool. Yes, that was a pretty cool one, where we erased his monocle. So, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Holden. So, now that we've described what the Chimera is, now we need to know, how do we defeat one? Well, the first step to fighting a Chimera is you don't want to go against a Chimera head on. That's the first rule. Now, if you find yourself in the unfortunate circumstance where you are confronted with a mob of people, the Chimera itself in person, and you are in that situation, the appropriate response would, one, to be to get away if you can. You don't want to be involved directly with this kind of situation. However, if escape is an impossibility, the next best option is to cast a individuation spell. So what is an individuation spell? Approach the mob unafraid and simply request in a very, and this is important, it has to be done with confidence and sincerity and to break the pattern of the mob, and simply ask, excuse me, could I speak with whoever's in charge? That's it. If you say those words, you're doing a lot of damaging spell work in a very, very short amount of time. One, if it's a small Chimera, there's no hierarchy established yet, which will cause immediate chaos in the vicinity as people try to immediately assemble. Who is in charge? Wait, what's in charge of us? Which head is the real master? And that is going to sow the seeds of future destruction of the group, because whoever gets elected to the in charge will eventually be the person who they eat alive themselves. Because again, the Chimera does not care about or believe anything that it says. It simply wants to eat and survive on other people's energies. And if it can't get other people's energies, they will eat themselves. And so that is the first step. The second step is you will arrive and identify the weak point of the Chimera, which is the symbol, which is the leader. So whoever comes forth as the leader is going to be the person that you want to gain information on in the future for future steps. And then third, you simply say, what is it that you want? And then tell them, oh, okay. And now that you've broken the pattern of the mob, now you are in negotiations, you can use a simple get out of, oh, I hear what you're saying, and I have to leave because I have to leave. And that will be enough for you to usually get an escape. So that would be the approach if you are in the dangerous situation where you do have to confront a mob and you cannot escape. Escape is always priority number one. You do not fight a Chimera head on, but if you have to, that is the spell to use. And brings us to the principle of documenting as much information as possible. And of course, throughout all of this, you want to make sure that you are recording everything that you possibly can. So now that we know that we cannot confront a Chimera directly, how do we kill the Chimera, or how do we fight the Chimera? Well, the first step is to not feed them any energy. You want to, when they come for you and they attack you and they say horrible things in your chat or attack you online or tell your friends that you suck or come at you with all their vitriol, and that's the fire of their words, your job is to, one, never reason with them, ever. Just do not engage with any demands, regardless of how simple, how small, how just absolutely mundane it is. Do not negotiate with a mob. Do not reason with a mob. A mob is not a person. You cannot justify it. They do not care about any of the things that they will say to you. They do not care about any of the things that they will scream at you. They are only trying to stimulate emotional responses for you to feed on. And so that is the first step. The second step is never, ever apologize. Never. Do not apologize to a chimera. If you apologize to a chimera, that is a consent for them to feast on your emotions. It doesn't matter how rational it is. It doesn't matter how right the apology should be, and no matter how reasonable it seems that you should apologize. Never, ever apologize to a chimera. Ever. Do not do it. So, now you have what not to do in this regard. Now, how do we start taking the offensive? Well, if you have applied these two principles, you will find that the chimera is getting very, very angry. They're going to escalate the attacks and the emotional attacks upon you. They're going to continue to escalate more and more and more until they're going to show their vulnerability. So, metaphysically speaking, or mythologically speaking, how do we defeat the chimera? We go on the offensive. How do we go on the offensive against the chimera? We ride on Pegasus. That's how Chimera was defeated in mythology. So we need to take the high ground. So both of these first two strategies are about holding yourself up higher than the chimera. You are saying, this thing is beneath me, it is below me, I do not reason with it, I don't apologize, I'm not going to acknowledge it. It doesn't even exist to me. This thing is non-existent. I could care less. This is going to absolutely infuriate the chimera and will cause them to become vitriolic and start attacking in highly, highly aggressive ways. This is where you start the attack phase. At this point, as we mentioned in the very beginning, you should be documenting every single message, every single comment, every single post, and every single piece of information they send your way. Every message, every phone call, document all of it. Now, as you continue to not react and not engage and not show emotion, they are going to continue to escalate the attacks to try and stimulate the emotion. As you resist the emotional change, which they so desperately need to feed on, you are eventually going to trigger them to take an action that is a violation of morals, ethics, and the law. So, once you've documented all of this information, you will begin to express anything that seems immoral, anything that seems unethical, and anything that seems illegal publicly. And for example, let's say that the chimera sends you a horrible message about how you should die and that you're a terrible person. Well, now that you have that person's information and that message, why not call their employer and let them know that their employee is sending things like that? And is that the right image that their company wants to be presenting? This is how you start to fight the chimera. So these are the small arrows of logos that you will start to levy and attack with. Finally, as you begin to assault with logos, shooting the arrows from above, the truth, down onto the chimera, the final step will arise. They will begin to thrash, they will begin to freak out when you start attacking and assaulting them with moral attacks. That will cause them to become even more aggravated, and that is when they will probably pass the line of legality. This is how you finally kill the chimera. You kill the chimera when they violate the law. Now, the most likely laws they will violate are cyberstalking laws and invasion of privacy and hacking. So, once that happens and you've documented everything, that is when you can then press charges and legal attacks and destroy and kill the chimera. Because the way to kill the chimera is with the truth that they give you, the hot lead, and then to use their own fury, their breath, to heat it up and stick it directly into their hearts. And that is how you defeat the chimera mythologically, and that is how you defeat the chimera in real life. So, if you find yourself in this situation, and in the upcoming years, many people will find themselves in this situation, Remember these rules, remember how to slay the chimera, and remember, don't react, never apologize, document everything, and attack from the moral high ground, and finally strike them down with the law. And that is how you defeat a chimera.